Buenas noches, estamos a punto de comenzar. Si quieren los que están de pie, hay 2 o 3 sillitas todavía disponibles. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es María Teresa Martínez y soy la decana asociada de estudios graduados. Es para mí un placer darles la bienvenida a esta casa, en esta actividad, que es parte de la celebración del 25 aniversario de las 3 maestrías pioneras de esta casa. Esas maestrías son la maestría en Relaciones Públicas, la maestría en Sistemas de Información y Tecnología Educativa y la maestría de Gerencias de Sistemas de Información. Durante todo este año académico hemos tenido diferentes actividades, invitando diferentes recursos, y esta noche le toca a GSI, a Gerencias de Sistemas de Información, empezar su celebración. Para eso tenemos una persona muy interesante que nos va a estar conversando durante la tarde de hoy, y va a estar también el día de mañana conversando con nosotros. Esta transmisión se está haciendo en directo vía Ustream y la vamos a estar también poniendo en YouTube. Así es que si usted entra a la página de Sagrado, Maestría 25, sagrado.edu, ahí les dan direcciones para poder ver la retransmisión o para ver lo que se pierda mañana, porque si no puedes estar aquí y te lo pierdes, lo puedes entonces estar en verdad accediendo a él. Para dar nuestra bienvenida formal y nuestra presentación al invitado de esta noche, les voy a dejar con la licenciada Carmen Cintrón, que es la catedrática del área de Gerencia de Sistemas de Información.
Muy buenas noches a todos. Voy a hacer, como decía una de las exalumnas nuestras, que también es CIO, fue CIO de la Autoridad de Energía Eléctrica y del Fondo del Seguro del Estado. A mí no me gustan los teléfonos, digo, los micrófonos. Bienvenidos todos a su casa, a la Universidad del Sagrado Corazón. Sé que tengo muchos alumnos, tanto de bachillerato como de maestría, en diversas áreas, no solamente en las áreas de tecnologías de información, sino en otras áreas de nuestro ofrecimiento académico. Siéntanse cómodos porque realmente nuestro recurso hoy, el doctor Harry Lewis, aunque su bachillerato fue en matemática y física y su doctorado en matemática aplicada, de las primeras personas que completaron doctorado en el área de cómputos, y es miembro de la Facultad de Cómputos de la Universidad de Harvard, de donde es exalumno y donde también fue decano del equivalente a lo que básicamente es sagrado, que es el college de bachillerato, el Harvard College. Es una persona que integra la visión de lo que nosotros creemos que debe ser un profesional desde la perspectiva de sagrado. Un humanista donde la parte de valores, la parte de principios, la parte de responsabilidad social va por encima de la parte de formación técnica y tecnológica. Hemos tenido la satisfacción en el día de hoy de compartir con él en diversos grupos gerenciales, académicos, y ahora con nuestros estudiantes y otros invitados, y ha confirmado que seleccionamos la persona adecuada porque esa precisamente es la visión que nosotros queremos del profesional de tecnologías de información, donde la tecnología es una herramienta al servicio de la humanidad, donde la idea es promover un idealismo para construir una mejor sociedad y estas tecnologías nos ayuden a construir esa mejor sociedad. Así que ahora voy brevemente a hacer una mención en inglés. Dr. Harry Lewis has been with us since yesterday afternoon, and he has, by this exchange, informal and formal exchange, he has confirmed that was the perfect candidate for celebrating the 25th anniversary of the MBA in MIS, because he shares Sagrado's vision that professionals in this area should be first human people from the humanities, committed to social responsibility and constructing a better world, and second, technologies. So I leave you with Dr. Harry Lewis.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me all right? Good, thank you. Thank you so much. It is an honor to be here. Someone afterwards can tell me what she said in Spanish. What she said in English was very nice, though. So thank you. I do appreciate that. And I'm sorry I can't speak to you in Spanish actually, but that's the way it is. So I've been teaching computer science since 1974 at Harvard, and I've had the opportunity over the years to have taught. Well, it's actually a little sobering to think about it, because the two students I've taught who've had the most impact on the world were the two who immediately dropped out of Harvard after taking my course. There was Bill Gates first, and then Mark Zuckerberg. The two of them did exactly the same thing. So I can't quite figure out what that means. But anyway, after all these years of teaching and of doing research and writing on technical aspects of computer science, I've become in recent years much more concerned about how the revolution that I've witnessed is going to play out in the long run for human society. And so that's kind of the subject of today, and also the subject of tomorrow. I'm going to take a different angle tomorrow for those of you who are going to be here, which is more narrowly focused on privacy issues. But today I'm going to mention privacy, but I really want to talk about the wonders and horrors of the fact that we have so much information available to us all the time, and that everything, to a first approximation, can get stored forever and never disappear. And we're beginning to see signs of horror, and we all occasionally have that experience of thinking that there is simply way too much information. And the moral from my story is, before you wish that you didn't, be careful what you wish for, because you may get it. And in the long run, if we're not aware of how, of the many ways in which information is already, there are threats to reduce the amount we have, we may be passive participants in a revolution that doesn't turn out the way that's going to be best for humanity. So that's kind of the theme of the talk. So I want to sort of explain the problem first, give some kind of historical background about the significance of the information revolution. We've all lived through it, but it's astonishing to think how important it is, really. And then talk about the ways that we can lose information. So here we are. I get this email from Carmen. I didn't know anything about this university, and in 2 seconds flat, I saw not only what you said on your webpage, which I'm sure is all perfectly truthful and accurate, but I have this hopefully somewhat more neutral presentation. Obviously, it has its risks and liabilities with believing anything that Wikipedia, says about you. But it does very nice here. It says it's got the best communications program in Puerto Rico, and which is very nice. And so this is just an example. Okay, this is just an example that we have instantaneous information about anything you want to know something about, more or less. And Wikipedia is a remarkable creation. But at the end of the day, maybe creating something that we already knew how to create, an encyclopedia, maybe can't be counted as a most extraordinary achievement of the internet. But still, the fact that you can get information about everything, everywhere, all of the time, and the fact that you can, thanks to Mr. Zuckerberg and the people who went before him, you can exchange information with people and find out about other people that are, in your friendship group, and connect with them all the time, instantaneously, all the time. If somebody wants to flatter me after the talk is over, you can ask me about the moment when I was very, very briefly the center of the Facebook social network. But it's not part of the story here. Okay, and then we have this. Okay, then we have WikiLeaks. We have secret U.S. diplomatic cables, information that is not supposed to be accessible to everybody, and on which the lives of diplomats, the lives of innocent third parties who have nothing to do with U.S. diplomatic processes, but are people with whom the U.S. Diplomats have been exchanging information who are, rebellious or whatever, splattered on the internet for the entire world to see, and the U.S. government, at least, doing everything it possibly can to make the information disappear and to take out its, I think, to some degree, its frustration on the people who created the site on which the information is posted. But certainly their attempts to make the information inaccessible completely fruitless, because it's been replicated too many times, and all of the wonderful things that makes it possible for you to sit anywhere and get information about your university are exactly the same reasons why it's possible for everybody who to get the diplomatic cables once they've been reached. So there's the tension, right? The tension is, this is just one of many downsides to ubiquitous access, instantaneous access to information everywhere. So I want to start by reminding us that this notion of information freedom or information spreading across the world is an old ideal, not just an idea, but an ideal. It's a principal theme of Enlightenment thought, and it's very much built into the premises in the American system of government. So here we have this wonderful quote from Thomas Jefferson, where he's talking about ideas, and he says that ideas should freely spread from one to another over the globe for the moral and mutual instruction of man and improvement of his condition seems to have been peculiarly and benevolently designed by nature when she made them, when she made ideas, like fire, expansible over all space without lessening their density at any point, right? You have an idea, you put it on the internet, and it spreads everywhere, but it's still, it hasn't taken away from the place where it was. And like the air in which we breathe, move, and have our physical being, incapable of confinement or exclusive appropriation. So this is from a letter that Jefferson wrote, and it's one of the sort of sacred texts of the internet philosophers. They like to go back to this letter of Jefferson, and it does feel to me, reading this, that the internet is the fulfillment of this Enlightenment dream, on which which is absolutely fundamental to the premises of the American system of democracy. And it keeps coming back. A year ago, when Hillary Clinton was scolding the Chinese, before she started scolding Julian Assange, when she was scolding the Chinese about their censorship of Google, she says, the more freely information flows, the stronger societies become. She reminded that this idea of free flow of information was kind of integral to democratic institutions. Access to information helps citizens hold their own governments accountable, generates new ideas, encourages creativity and entrepreneurship. Right? So these are old themes, and they're still very much relevant. They're still very much in the air, and you feel it. You see it in what's happened in North Africa in the past couple of months is extraordinary, and have no doubt about it. This was an internet revolution, at least the one in Egypt, and probably some of there's all kinds of debates about whether this revolution was technologically enabled or not. But take it from me, this was, and they themselves recognized it in Egypt. This was actually the Google. This guy. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but this was the Google guy who was imprisoned and was ultimately released. And the first thing he did was immediately say, not this was an internet revolution, but this was a Facebook revolution, which is an extraordinary thing for one of the lead people at Google to have said. And he actually says he wants to meet Mark Zuckerberg one day and thank him, talking on behalf of Egypt. This revolution started online. We don't need to read the whole thing. So that's that. But unfortunately, you know, if you take Hillary Clinton's words and map them onto the picture of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, it doesn't show so well on that screen, but on the other screens you can see it. The logo is, you know, a black world, you know, melting or into a brighter world. It seems like this is exactly the same philosophy that he's espousing. I'm not defending him now at the moment. I just want to note, at the moment, I just want to talk about how tricky this idea of information freedom is. The more freely information flows, the stronger societies become. Access to information helps citizens hold their own governments accountable and so on, which is presumably exactly what Julian Assange would say about what he's doing. But he is now, of course, the subject of a pretty strenuous, you know, attack by the same U.S. officials who a year ago were scolding Google. So the picture is a bit complicated. Okay. This is the most remarkable historical precedent for this kind of internet utopianism, that the world, you know, that free flow of information is empowering a good thing, and it's coming. So a free beer, courtesy of me, from anybody who can identify this guy. Very rarely does anybody recognize who he is. So this is H.G. Wells, whom we know as a science fiction writer. Okay, but he was also an essayist on technological, and you know, this is an incredible passage that he wrote in 1937. He says, "There is no practical obstacle whatever now to the creation of an efficient index to all human knowledge, ideas, and achievements, to the creation, that is, of a complete planetary memory for all mankind, and not simply an index. The direct reproduction of the thing itself can be summoned to any properly prepared spot. This in itself is a factor of tremendous significance. It foreshadows a real intellectual unification of our race. The whole human memory can be, and probably in a short time will be, made accessible to every individual." It's incredible. It's incredible, right? The only trouble is, that every part of this came true except this part, right? The whole real intellectual unification of our race. This looks like still a work in progress. I mean, you know, particularly if you go back get back a couple of slides here, right? So maybe this is where we're going, but who knows? So that's, you know, this is what I want to explore. It's just amazing, you know. He basically predicted the internet and Google, right? That's what Google is, just a big index, and you know, summoning whatever it is, and here's Google's now digitized all the world's artworks, and they can be summoned to any properly prepared spot. All you need is a laptop and a broadband connection and a web browser. And so this is, every time I read this, it just, makes my, so the question is, another audience participation moment here. He says, there is no practical obstacle whatever now to the creation of an efficient index to all. Now, in 1937, there was something that actually happened in 1937. There was a new technology which he predicted was going to create intellectual unification of the human race through the creation of an efficient index to all human knowledge and the ability to bring it. Was he like experimenting with internet routing in his basement or something? What is this? What technology was he talking about? No, it wasn't. You're right. Turing was about just you've got the time just about right. But he's not referring to Turing's work. Huh? Circuits? No. Something more specific than that. A real piece of technology that people were using. Not the telephone. Not the radio. Huh? Not the television. Not the telegraph. It was going to be the future of. It was going to be the future of media. It was going to be the future of knowledge. It was going to unify the human race. What was it? Microfilm. Microfilm. Anybody remember microfilm? Maybe those of you who are students are too young to have ever actually seen a microfiche before, but you know, this was it. Anyway, okay, so he didn't get the technology story exactly right, but it's pretty amazing. Okay, so here's now with that way, you know, so I love this utopian spirit, and I actually believe in it. All right, but here are 9 ways that this utopian vision can fail to happen. And you know, our job, all of us who are involved in some way in the future of technology, the future of information technology businesses and policies and so on, and just as, you know, citizens, these are things that we all need to think about because they foreshadow things that may be happening without our even realizing that they're happening. Okay? So I'm going to run through them quickly, and then I'm going to go through them one at a time and explain what they are, because they're not all obvious. So one is called digital death. Second is called political censorship. Third is market collapse. The fourth is homophily, which sounds a little naughty, but I'll explain what that is. It isn't what you think. Fifth is intellectual property lockdown. Sixth is ownership convergence. Seventh is fighting privacy infringement. Eighth is social censorship. And ninth is the war on terror. So these are all forces or processes that are underway which have a tendency to restrict information. And maybe in certain cases we want it restricted to a certain degree. But in many cases they conspire to actually overstretch their limits of what the problems they were intended to solve, even assuming that we got agreement on the limitations that we were that the problems they were trying to solve were real problems. Okay, so let me go through these. So the first is digital death. And this is a very interesting phenomenon, which we don't think about that much. What's going to happen if all of our reading goes online? You know, half of hardback sales are now, I think, are ebooks, Kindle books. Amazon now sells as many in the hardcover market. They sell as many Kindle ebooks as they sell hardcover books. So look, you know, this stuff happens so fast, it's very easy to imagine that we could all wake up in 5 years and, you know, we'll all have our e-readers. And for old stuff, you know, we'll go to Google Books, maybe, because, you know, right now you can go to Google Books and read all the public domain works. And it's great, because you get not only, you know, the adventures of Tom Sawyer and Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, but, you know, you get, you know, the news of the world, and, you know, I was married to Jack the Ripper on the, you know, the tabloids. You can get everything, okay? So the question is, you know, how are we going to know that the stuff is still going to be around for our children's children to read it? And so here's a moral tale to think about. This is the Doomsday Book. This was published, quote unquote, compiled in 1086, 20 years after the Norman invasion of England. And the William the Conqueror asked for a survey of all of the lands that were now under his dominion. And so this is an index for province by province in England, county by county, of, you know, who was there and who owned the land and what was going on in terms of farmland and all the rest of that. This was an index published in 1086. In 1986, in honor of the 900th anniversary of the issuance of the Doomsday Book, the BBC produced an updated version. They went around and they took aerial photographs and they interviewed people and recorded video and audio and so on. And they published it and they issued it and they put it out in the public libraries, so all the people of England would have access to it in 1986. And by 1996, it was completely unreadable because they put it on 12-inch video discs. They stopped making the 12-inch video discs. They hadn't allocated any government funding to keep transferring the bits, the zeros and ones, onto new media. And just at the last minute, somebody found one boxed up 12-inch video disc reader in a basement somewhere and moved the data off. But all the guys who had constructed the data structures and had done talked about the indexing algorithms and all, they'd all gone on to other projects now. And there was no more money to pay them to come back and reconstruct. So they actually had to hire a kind of digital forensics guy to go back and read data structures book from 10 years earlier to try to imagine how they could have organized the data based on what was then known about how you would do such a project. And they did manage to recover it, but just by a hair. So digital data is great, and it literally, given the storage capacities we've got, I mean, I don't know, maybe the CIOs in the audience won't accept my premise that digital data costs nothing to store and nothing to communicate, because it does seem to actually absorb a lot of everybody's budget. But to a first approximation, we can think that this is going towards being costless to store and transmit. But somehow society has to have enough of a vision of the future to know that if you store stuff on video discs or whatever kind of digital media of the day, there has to be a protocol for renewing it, particularly for irreplaceable objects. And this is a really hard problem because the stuff that you're most likely to lose is the stuff which is completely uninteresting now, but will be important 100 years from now. And so, the sort of curation process, as it calls, selecting material and renewing it, is very difficult. Okay, that's number one. Political censorship. I'm not going to say too much about political censorship more than I've said already because it's so obvious, and it's the one that everybody knows about, that we can talk about information freedom, but it's not free in large parts of the world. This is a map. There's actually two different colors here. There's heavy censorship in the countries in black. There is a lot of surveillance and a lesser degree of censorship in some other countries. But notice that some countries that we think of as free societies, like France and Australia, for example, are on the censorship list. And those are important stories because they justify in democratic countries even forms of censorship that are rejected elsewhere in the world. So I just, I put this up. We know about China and we know about Saudi Arabia and, we know about Iran and so on. And that's an important story. But it's not just in totalitarian regimes. But anybody who hasn't tried hasn't been to China and to really get the firsthand experience of what it means to be in a regime where information is censored, should do the following exercise. This is the Wikipedia protests on the Wikipedia page on the protests in Tiananmen Square in 1989. I was had the good fortune to be there 2 years ago for the 20th anniversary celebration of this in Hong Kong. And I actually happened to be flying from inside mainland China to Hong Kong on the day. So I got up in the morning, and it was just another ordinary day. I was at a university. Nobody in the university was talking about this Tiananmen thing. A lot of the students apparently didn't even know about what had happened 20 years earlier. And then you go to Hong Kong, and the entire city basically turned out to recognize it. So you know, it's a very strong sort of form of censorship. If you Google Tiananmen you get a result like this. You immediately get the Wikipedia page on the Tiananmen riots. You get pictures of the tanks and so on. If you try doing the same thing using the search engine that people in China have access to, since Google having pulled out, which is called Baidu. Everybody played with Baidu? So you can just do it. You just go to Baidu.com. It's worth doing. Go to Baidu.com, type in Tiananmen protests, and the first hit is, you know, 2 men who planned a mass protest in Tiananmen Square in December have been arrested, or something like that. Okay, so there's some suggestion there that there was something to protest in Tiananmen Square recently, and the only information you get back is that if you try it, you'll get arrested. That's basically the thing. The Baidu servers are actually inside China, inside mainland China, but they're accessible from the outside, just as just like Google, so you can use it. But if you go one step further and use Baidu to search for Falun Gong, which for reasons that are still mysterious to me is just about as dirty a word as you can say to the Chinese government. If you try to Google Falun Gong, you actually, a squirrel magically chews through your internet connection before the Falun Gong words will even cross into China, so that the Baidu servers can. So the Baidu servers inside China never even get it. They cut off the connection to the server at the border, and just drop it and go away. So this is I actually tried this. I actually did this in my hotel room in Shanghai one time. It was on a visit where I was under the protection of the U.S. State Department. I was a State Department lecturer, and I figured if they arrested me for doing bad stuff on the internet, the State Department, I wouldn't try this on my own anyway. So there's a form of censorship. But now I got to go back and talk about the WikiLeaks thing and Julian Assange again. Okay, so I don't know. Julian Assange may be a terrible person. He may have done awful things. But as far as anybody has been able to document, all he did was, somebody sent him some information. He put it up on the on his website. They're trying to figure out if he actually induced the guy who actually stole the information to give it to him, but plainly that hasn't been established yet. And here's Joe Biden calling him a high-tech terrorist. Joe Lieberman is saying that people ought to look into whether the New York Times is guilty of espionage for having reported in print some of the things that were up on the WikiLeaks website. And the problem is that any theory under which, as far as I can see, any legal theory under which Assange is either a terrorist or the New York Times is a spy would mean that any journalist who obtained any government secret, who was given any government secret by some disgruntled insider in Washington, a la the Pentagon Papers of my generation, really played a key role in ending the Vietnam War, and published them or made them available to the general public, would be equally guilty of terrorism or espionage. So my worry is actually that I perfectly understand why the diplomats in the State Department and so on hate people who publish secrets, but I can't think of a legal construction under which ordinary journalists who get inside information from government officials couldn't be convicted on exactly the same kind of charges if making information available in this way is terrorism or espionage. And I just, I want to stress, this freedom of information thing is, deeply rooted in, the founding principles of the American democracy. So this is John Adams. The people have a right, an indisputable, unalienable, indefeasible, never mind what these words mean. It just means it's like really divine right to that most dreaded and envied kind of knowledge. I mean, of the characters and conduct of their rulers, okay? So you know, the sort of freedom of the press and the freedom of people to report what they learn from insiders is really basic to the democratic process. This is the bad guy, okay? I don't think it's Julian. I mean, Julian Assange may be a bad guy, but he's not an American. You know, you can't even accuse him of not being patriotic because it's not his country. But this guy is Bradley Manning, who was the guy who actually smuggled, as far as we can tell, allegedly, I should say. He hasn't been tried, and he's got his right to a fair trial. But all of the attention is on Julian Assange. This is the guy who smuggled the disk out of the secure location with the information apparently written on a CD that said Lady Gaga on it, as though it was a pirated Lady Gaga album, which of course was perfectly all right to take out of a secure facility, apparently, because nobody stopped him when he did that. So I don't know what that says about our value. Anyway, okay, market collapse. How are we doing here? Okay, we got market collapse. Market collapse is the notion that information will cease to be available because the economy, the economic model, the business model for producing information, it collapses because information is free, right? So this is the notion that if you can't sell a physical newspaper and get people to pay $1 for it, there won't be any salaries to pay the journalists who have to go investigate things to find things out. And you know, so this is one of our, you're going to meet a few characters here who are worth remembering just because they're symbols of what's happening in the world. This man is named Sidney Harmon, and he's holding the dollar bill that he paid for Newsweek magazine. Newsweek magazine was once a great news magazine, and it was not worth anything anymore because its debts were actually far greater. It's actually the dollar is not, it wasn't even worth $1 because it was saddled with debt. How did this happen? How did the newspaper business collapse and the news magazine's business collapse? Well, and first of all, you know, who cares? You know, what difference does it make if we don't have them? Well, this is an interesting case. This is the Cincinnati Post. It's one of many newspapers that have gone out of business. This happens to be an important one because it's a newspaper in a medium-sized city. It died about 4 years ago. And what happened was, because it's been studied, is after the Cincinnati Post stopped publishing, it became even harder, measurably harder, to unseat incumbents in local elections, okay? Because one of the things that the newspaper did was to give some coverage and some visibility and a megaphone to people who were challenging the entrenched public officials. And without the newspaper to do that, particularly people who didn't have huge amounts of advertising money to spend, the political process stagnated. And it literally happened in Cincinnati. So that's the kind of thing you worry about. So a lot of my worries here, as you can see, are tied up with the democratic process and what it's going to mean if, for all of these different reasons, the sources of information diminish. How did it happen? This guy is to blame. Okay, so audience query number 3 here now. You're not doing too good. Who is he? I've told you what he's responsible for. Maybe you can back calculate. What? Somebody have an answer? Huh?
The IBM logo right there.
No, that's just his laptop. That's just his open laptop. It's not a logo on his shirt. Okay, this guy's name is Craig Newmark, and he built one night, probably in about 15 minutes, a website called Craigslist. Yeah. Okay. So now we know who he is. Okay. So this completely bled the classified advertising revenue, which was a very steady source of revenue for newspapers. And it's, you know, if any of my students built a website this bad, I would scold them, right? It's like, I mean, this is so crowded, and, you know, I mean, it's got, yes, it's got all of these catchy sexual things in it and all the rest of this stuff, but it's really, it's a lousy design, but he has absolutely no motivation to, you know, to change it because everybody uses it. Okay, maybe somebody will come along, maybe one of you people will go along and build a better, you know, build a better interface. But so this is, you know, this caused the demise of this information economy because posting an ad on Craigslist is free, and it's hard to beat free if you're a newspaper trying to stay in business and use the revenues that you get from advertising to pay for your journalism. Okay, so homophily is actually a particular kind of response we have to information overload, a human response. So we're now talking about something that is actually under our own control as opposed to something that other people are doing to us. This is a case of being our own worst enemy. Homophily is what it means is that our human response to having lots of different information sources available to us is to look at only the ones that we know we're going to agree with. Okay? So, you know, rather than using a diversity of points of view or the opportunity to read about, you know, foreign countries, you know, who now have their own online newspapers and so on, you know, we just read everything that there is that aligns with our particular political perspective and is about stuff and places and people that we already know a lot about already. So it's you know, it's like of the same. Is what homophily means. And, you know, just so this is how we get the extremist wackos. And if any of you think that the birthers are not extremist wackos, I'm sorry, but they are. Okay, so this is Barack Obama's birth certificate. It's real. It's, you know, but if you want to find, you know, endless amounts to read about how it's fake, it's out there and you can find it. You know, you can also find neutral sites like Snopes and Fact Check and so on, and you can find very angry sites from the, you know, from the left. But, you know, everybody goes to whatever version of the truth is they're started off with, and take that as their source of knowledge. So this is something that we can actually do something about as individuals. You know, just, you know, remind ourselves. You know, we have to exercise a little bit of self-discipline when we spend all of our time, if we're, we're listening to either Fox News or MSNBC or whatever it is, whichever version, and those are fairly mild in their left. So this is, I love this quote from the cowboy comedian Will Rogers, says, who again would have predicted this problem perfectly. It's, it's not the lack of information. It ain't what folks know that's the problem. It's what they know that ain't so. That's the problem. It's the internet has made it possible, the sort of editorial function that newspapers and book publishers and so on used to serve, that was a constructive form of gating force on the flow of information, having been taken down. We now have vast amounts of information, but it's kind of uncurated information. And rather than using our critical reasoning skills and applying some kind of reputational tests religiously, we all tend to, just go to the site that we think we're going to agree with and get our information there. Okay, intellectual property lockdown. So that simply refers to the fact that information is moving from public hands into private hands. And, and there's kind of no better example of this than this wonderful thing that happened a couple of years ago, when people who thought they had bought from Amazon a copy of George Orwell's 1984, of all things, woke up one morning and discovered that Jeff Bezos had gone into their home and taken the book off their Kindles. And there was a good reason for it. They had some contractual snafu with whoever had the publishing rights, and they bought the book. Amazon had bought the book from the wrong distributor or something like that, and he gave everybody their money back and so on. But remember that when you start relying on private sources like Amazon for our e-reading, our digital books and so on, we have to rely on their lack of censorship, right? And you can have an economic argument about this. It would never be in their interest to take information away because then it would be economics, the market forces will take care of it. I'm not so sure, given the fact that the intellectual property is increasingly going to be under the control of a smaller and smaller number of corporate, principally, hands. So the intellectual property rules have gotten so strong now as the content industries fear the same kind of market collapse that has happened with the newspapers, that one of the curious aspects of the WikiLeaks story is that even though the US government is having a very hard time figuring out what charge they can file against Assange, what he has actually done that's illegal under US law, if he ever released any corporate document, even a public corporate document, a Bank of America form letter, not their internal books, anything on which Bank of America had copyright, then they would immediately have a crime they could charge him with. And if he did it willfully, quote unquote, as the copyright law says, then it's actually a crime, not just a violation of civil law. So that's it. And this business, the way the movie and music and television industries have responded to the digital revolution really has created some weird and surprising paradoxes. So this is a quite interesting story. So we all know, about the illegality of pirating software and pirating movies and downloading illegally, stuff that's under copyright. It's all been drilled into our heads. And at the time of the 2008 election, both candidates promised to strengthen, even beyond where they already were, copyright protections. So this is McCain's campaign platform statement. John McCain will protect the creative industries from piracy. The entertainment industry is both a vital sector of the domestic economy and among the largest U.S. exporters. While the internet has provided tremendous opportunity for the creators of copyrighted works, including music and movies, to distribute their works around the world at low cost, it has also given rise to a global epidemic of piracy. John McCain supports efforts to crack down on privacy, both on the internet and off. Okay? So he was going to strengthen copyright law. So then this odd thing happened. Back during the primary season, Katie Couric, on whichever network she's on, I can't remember. Which network is she on? CBS? Okay. So on CBS, on the evening news, complained that the media were being mean to Hillary Clinton because she was a woman. Okay? She had a little editorial thing that she did on that. John McCain's campaign took about a 10-second clip of Katie Couric saying that about how the media were mean and sexist, and said, the media are being mean and sexist to Sarah Palin. Get it? He made a little campaign ad saying, you know, if Katie Couric can complain that the media are being mean to Hillary, I'm going to complain they're being mean to Sarah. What happened? What happened was that CBS immediately told YouTube to take this down because it was infringing the copyright of the copyrighted material, namely Katie Couric's little video. Would they have done the same thing if it had been Barack Obama instead of, you know, I don't know. You know, maybe they do it automatically. I suspect not. And as a legal claim, this was specious. I think most copyright lawyers agree that this is entirely within fair use, to take 5 or 10 seconds of TV and, you know, put it up there. But the way the law is written is so strong that YouTube, where this thing was posted, had essentially no recourse because they have a safe harbor from prosecution under US copyright law if they just take it down immediately and let the parties argue about it without the thing being up. And McKay wrote this letter to YouTube. I said, wait a minute. If you take it down for 10 days, the election is going to be over by that time. You know, this is like we're right at crunch time on this. You can't take this ad down and call it. And YouTube wrote back and said, you know, YouTube being Google, wrote back to McKay and said, you know, sorry, we're just doing, you know, what the law, you know, says we can do to protect ourselves. But we'd be glad to work with either President McCain or Senator McCain on reform of copyright law. That's literally what Google's letter back, you know, whichever you are in the, you know, after the election is over. So this business, copyright law is stretched beyond reasonable limits, and actually, as in this case, actually can be used as a legal form of censorship, even of political speech. You know, you can argue a lot about a lot of things, but there's no doubt that that McCain ad was legitimate political speech. Ownership convergence is a particular form of what would more properly and more generally be called economic censorship. So it's another version of the thing that we talked about, which is as the ownership of information or the control of the distribution of information falls into smaller and smaller number of corporate hands, the lack of regulation, legitimately, in general, of private entities puts at risk the public access to information. If we rely on Google Books instead of public libraries, for example, we may live to regret it. All right? So here's just a little bit about how much convergence there has been since the World Wide Web started to come into existence and so on, in, you know, who produces the stuff that we see. Here we're talking about cable television, just, you know, which is another digital phenomenon. So it now turns out that these 4 companies, Disney, News Corp, Time Warner, and Viacom, now own all the broadcast networks, all the over-the-air broadcast networks, 90% of the cable networks, 75% of primetime programming, and 70% of primetime TV share. So basically, when you turn on your television set, you know, it's down to, you're down to at most 4 sources. And, you know, it used to be a lot more than that. And likewise, if you talk about the carriers, the wires that bring the stuff into your houses and so on, there's been incredible drop. There were 1,500 cable systems in the 1960s. By 1972, it was down to 10%, had almost half the market. By 96, 2/3 of the market was in the hands of 5 cable systems. And now, most of us have only 1 cable supplier. So and because the cable suppliers increasingly control internet access, most internet service is now over the cable. You know, we're now getting even convergence of the carriers that bring the stuff to us with the content providers who produce the stuff, as in the recent merger of NBC and Comcast, we're putting too much power in too few hands over the control of information. And here, again, I want to, this is another remarkable historical precedent, which I have to read. So this is 1883, and the telegraph was, by that time, a well-established technology. It was the way stock quotes moved across the country, and commodity prices moved across the country, and so on. But it was a monopoly. Western Union was a telegraph monopoly, in very much the same way that I think we're moving towards cable monopolies and even internet broadband monopolies. And so here's some testimony before Congress. A few years ago, a man started a news bureau in Cincinnati. Correspondent in New York filed the market reports each morning, and the Cincinnati gentleman sold the information to customers. The Western Union asked him to sell out to them, and he refused. Thereupon, his messages were taken away from the through wire and sent by a way wire. The distance in time was an hour, and the man was ruined. Okay, so this is exactly what Comcast did on the delivery of downloaded movies. They were trying to steer traffic to their cable TV service and away from their internet service. And so they slowed down, this happened about 2 years ago, they slowed down the delivery of downloaded movies to their internet customers. Here we are. Western Union controlled the market prices, all the political and general news sent over the wires, every single important personal communication. So this testimony was actually given by a guy who then went on and provided the financial backing to Alexander Graham Bell to start the telephone system, because he was worried about the implications for the American democracy to what we would now, what I'm calling here, ownership convergence. Okay, so this is my little plug here for network neutrality, which is, basically the notion. I hope you've heard of this concept. It's kind of fallen off the news cycle, but the notion that the information carriers, whoever providing the internet service, shouldn't pick and choose which content they want to deliver to whom, how quickly. So it would all be fine. The internet would work fine if there were competition. The antitrust division should have been involved long ago in these kinds of convergence operations. But in the absence of competition, internet regulation is actually necessary to continue the free flow of information. So that's my little net neutrality speech. OK, I got to move along here because I got 3 more bullets here, and I'm already close to an hour. So let me try to write it up quickly. Fighting privacy infringement. I'll have a lot more to say about that tomorrow for those of you who are here. But let me just say at the beginning that it's wonderful how much information Google has about us, just to pick on Google for a change. People at Google are some of my best friends. My daughter used to work for the company. It's a wonderful company. But it's like any large company, you worry about how much power they have. So this is the Google flu trends chart. Have you ever seen this? You haven't seen it? OK. So it turns out that the information that Google has about who is Googling words like sore throat, headache, sniffles, flu, words like that, leads the Center for Disease Control data about the actual incidence of flu by about 2 weeks. So Google is able to predict that the CDC data is going to follow. So this is where the CDC data was at the time that Google was already predicting this was going to happen. And here's a graph showing Google's flu predictions and the actual CDC data, people actually going into their doctors and their hospitals and saying, the doctor saying, yeah, you've got the flu, and then the doctor reports it or the hospital reports it, and it eventually finds its way to Atlanta, Georgia, and then they say there's a flu in Puerto Rico, okay? So this is incredible. It's incredible how, you know, that they know exactly where these flu outbreaks are happening before the best government data has it. Okay, so this is wonderful. It's wonderful, right? And they share this information with the CDC, and they ship flu vaccine to those. I don't know what they do. I don't know what you do about the flu at this point. But anyway, I'm sure it's medically valuable to have this information this far ahead of time. But that's really creepy that they know that much information about, you know, where the flu is breaking out. And because they also have this wonderful book service, you know, think about what that means for private reading. You know, we have this this notion that, you know, you're browsing the web, or, you know, you're just kind of, the web is out there, and we're just floating over it. We're visiting websites, like I'm visiting Puerto Rico, you know, and no one, you know, when I'm gone, except for the fact I'm being recorded, no one will be the wiser for it. But of course, what's actually happening is every time you flip the page of a book using Google Books or something like that, your computer is sending a request, Google's book is sending the page back, and then it waits a little while, and then you send another request, and, you know, and all the rest of that. And Google is saving all of that information. You know, so what this means, I had to pick some book. So this is the closing passage of James Joyce's Ulysses. This is Molly Bloom's Dream, let's just say. Let's say I'm reading, you know, that's a public domain work. You can go on Google Books and read it. That's in fact what this is. This is a text of. So it means that Google Books not only knows that I'm reading Ulysses, it knows that I'm reading and rereading Molly Bloom's Dream, right? That particular page. And then I flip back to some other page and knows how much time I spent reading that page, right? Because, I mean, why not? They've got all this information. They can store it forever. They might as well save it. It might be useful for some advertising. They may want to ship me an ad for, you know, for geraniums or something like this because I keep reading the page that has geraniums on it. You know, they can save all that. You know, they can do everything. They know exactly which words my eyes are resting on. But I tend to blow up my typeface very large, so they probably actually know which sentences I keep rereading. So there's an enormous incentive just on the privacy basis not to control Google. You know, that would be there's another solution to the regulatory one. You can have laws about how long they keep information, but this problem about reading books ought to be solved a different way. We ought to have a national digital public library that you can check books out of, and books that are out of copyright, you can keep them out as long as you want, and all the rest of that. And one of my colleagues at Harvard, the Harvard librarian, Bob Darnton, has actually started to get a project. Other countries have this. You know, Japan has a national digital, or did until they had some issues, but you know, the French are doing it. You know, we should do it in this country. I'll just skip over this slide here, but for those of you who won't be here tomorrow, I do want to show you this, which feels very much like an invasion of privacy to people. This is the Fundrace website. Anybody use the Fundrace website? So this is a peculiar form of voyeurism for people who are really into knowing how much money their neighbors give to political campaigns. Maybe, I don't know, it may be different in Puerto Rico because you don't get to vote for president, so there's probably less money coming out of Puerto Rico to support the political candidates. But you can just, you can bring up all these little elephants and donkeys. This is Harvard Square, so it's mostly donkeys, you know, and you can mouse over them and find out how much your neighbors are giving. So there will be attempts by many of the parties who are involved in some of these other things to exploit our fear of privacy to shut down some of these sources of information. Social censorship, which is a form of, think of the children, take information offline because children shouldn't see it, with the unintended consequence, or perhaps unintended consequence, that it becomes harder for everybody else to get as well. So this is the problem of, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. And it's very hard to know whether you're over 18 or over, 18 or over, or under 18. And so the sort of forms of social censorship, which try to make sure that little children don't see things, or even bigger children don't see things that should be censored, has repeatedly, if you look at the history of legislation, I'm not going to take through it in this country, has repeatedly wound up creating laws that have ultimately been overturned that make information less available to the rest of us that we have every right to see. Some of this is just purely in private hands. So Fox News declared recently that Homer Simpson's bear behind would no longer be allowed in the Homer Simpson videos. Not any great loss of our cultural heritage, perhaps, that we can't see Homer Simpson's butt. But if we can't see Homer Simpson's butt, we probably can't see Venus de Milo's either. What's the difference, after all? Except that Venus de Milo's you might actually want to look at. So these kinds of private censorship under the guise of protecting the children is a serious threat, and the politicians always have a tendency to bow to the social pressures for censorship when children. All you have to do to get a law passed is to say, but think of the children. All right. So here's an example of how this happened in my state. There was, for many years on the books in Massachusetts, this law, it's part of the laws against indecency and for public morality or something like that. Whoever disseminates to a minor any matter harmful to minors shall be punished by imprisonment. Okay, and what's matter? Any handwritten or printed material, and then it's a list of other things, phonograph records. It was a list that was the technology of the 1960s when this law was last updated, although probably it's a much older law than that. And then what happened was some creep, sent a dirty picture to a little girl and got off the charge because he sent it using a messaging software on a mobile phone. And messaging software on a mobile phone was not in this list of media. It wasn't matter as the law defined it, because the law was quite explicit in defining what matter was, and it was like printed stuff and a few other old technologies. So the legislatures were outraged, and the public was up in arms, and so the Massachusetts legislature rushed in and just tacked on a few more words to say, or any electronic communication created by means of the internet or a wireless network. Okay? But now, that's the whole World Wide Web, right? I mean, you put something up on your website, and some little kid gets it, now all of a sudden they can come get you. And all it's got to be is matter that's not suitable for a 6-year-old to see, right? So this was terrifying. Let's take Lady Chatterley's Lover. I don't know, maybe by contemporary standards, all 6-year-olds have already read Lady Chatterley's Lover. But when I was a kid, this was really wild stuff that you read under the covers, and it was, in fact, censored in the U.S. it was censored in the U.S. for a number of years. But anything that shouldn't be seen by children, I don't know, anatomical atlases or something like this, all of a sudden falls under this law. So the legislators, you should not trust legislators to do the right thing just because what they're trying to do is well-intentioned. That is a big risk here, particularly when they get into the world of media and technology and communications. So that law was overturned, and then it was they have some new language which is better, but the same pattern has happened over and over again. Okay, and finally, the war on terror. This story again goes back to the censorship of Google, because it wasn't just censorship that Google pulled out of China about. What really put them over the edge was when there were attacks on their servers, and the reaction to the use of the internet for attacks on commercial and government interests in this country has been very strong. So the FBI proposed, this is a little more than a year ago, and I think the proposal is still out there, that internet service providers should record every website we visit, so that if we do something bad and they want to see, they can come back and get a court order to review and get a list of every website we've visited. And it's already has forensic value. Murders have been solved not by going to the ISPs, but just by getting the web history on people's browsers once they know who they are. But this would make it much simpler, because they would just go to whoever supplies your internet service and ask them for a list of all of the websites. So this is not happening now, but this is the kind of thing that the law enforcement would like to have. And Mike McConnell, who used to be the director of intelligence and now works for a private consulting firm, really thinks the real problem is that we need to re-engineer the internet from the ground up to make attribution, geolocation, intelligence analysis, and impact assessment, who did it, where, why, and what was the result, more manageable. That's a nice phrase. So they want to track everything that happens on the internet, so that when bad stuff happens on the internet, they can go do it. And I find this an astonishing statement, astonishing only because it's so blandly accepted that because the internet is can be used as a tool of evil, that we should be quite happy to have everything we do on it and all of our cell phone locations and everything else captured. And I tried to imagine what would happen if somebody said, we need to re-engineer the postal service. Who's sending letters, when they leave, which mailbox they used, and all the rest of that. We've got to re-engineer that, because sometimes people send stuff and they're actually plots and conspiracies and people blowing things up, and they use postal mail to do it. So we got to re-engineer the whole postal service so that you've got to take your letter to the post office, and you got to show your ID when you mail the letter and all the rest of that, because that's exactly what they're talking about the internet when they do it. Let's wake up, everybody. And this we wouldn't do, and we shouldn't do it to the internet either. Okay, this is another Richard Clarke, another terrorist, anti-terrorist alarmist here. Wrote this book recently called Cyber War, basically with the same theme that the McConnell thing wrote. And this one I put this one up because this hurts so much. The basic idea of the internet began to form in the early 1960s, and the internet as we know it today is deeply imbued with the sensibilities and campus politics of that era. It is really the product of now aging hippies. That's me he's talking about. Right? But it's also Thomas Jefferson. It's also H.G. Wells. That's the spirit that we're talking about. And yeah, it has some things that can be done with it. Okay, I'll wrap up here. I'm sorry I kept you longer than I intended. I should take away 3 lessons, having given you the 9 sources of alarm. First is that information monopolies are always dangerous. If all of the information is in a single set of hands, either government or corporate, or a very small number of corporate hands, bells should go off, and you should think of ways that competition can be created. So things like this should set off alarms in our minds when we see them. This is HarperCollins, has an ebook program. They will sell books to public libraries. The public libraries can lend them out so that only one copy is in circulation at a time. If they want to lend out 10 copies, they have to buy 10 copies. But in addition to that, going forward, HarperCollins has added a new clause that says once the book has been lent and returned, quote unquote, you don't actually have to return it because the license to read it just expires, so the book disappears from your e-reader automatically or whatever, your laptop. Once it's been lent out, I think 25 times, I can't remember how many, then the library, public library, has to go back to HarperCollins and buy another copy. So they say, well, we're going to make the bits, even though they last forever, we're going to make them believe, we're going to act like they're paper. And after a library book gets lent out 25 times, apparently it's useless and they have to go buy another one. So they're trying to, create the book metaphor in the medium which has solved all of the problems that we have with books. And we understand they've got market collapse problems and so on. But this is an example of a technology in transition due to corporate policies and people groping their ways. And as citizens, we should speak up about this. And the librarians have reacted very violently about this. Actually, they've threatened to not buy any more HarperCollins books and all the rest of that. But we all have a stake in it because I don't know what this world is going to look like in 5 years, much less 25 years. But I know it's not going to look like this, where you're going to borrow a book from the public library, and if once the library lends it out 25 times, the 26th time they have to go buy another copy. I mean, this can't be the stable point in this flux world. So information monopolies are dangerous. Don't fear information. Fight information with information. And we're doing this in the blogging world, which has many flaws, but it actually has had great effect in the Middle East in spreading information. So there are counterinsurgencies in these information wars to the forces of control, and they should be supported. And ultimately, the thing that we really have to remember, and to close out this lecture in honor of the 25th anniversary of this program, education is the only answer. People who are uneducated can't see far enough to ask the kinds of questions that I'm asking you to ask yourselves. And I'm going to close with another Jefferson quote, because it just seems so appropriate. He says, "Enlighten the people generally, and tyranny and oppressions of body and mind will vanish like evil spirits at the dawn of day." And the contrapositive is also true, right? Without an educated population, tyranny has a much easier avenue into the hearts and minds of men. So thank you very much. Okay.
Are there any questions for our invited guest?
It's consider a paradox.
Could you please use the microphone so it can get recorded?
Wait a minute, you got to turn the thing on here.
Do you consider a paradox that the United States has the power and technology to manipulate and basically stop and censor all the information that is tactically harmful to the interests of the United States, and they don't use that power to censor? For example, if I have the data mining ability to,
if you have the data mining of
creating a bomb, why the United States, with all the NSA or these agencies who have the power to record all the information that is being broadcast all over the world, don't do censorship on that specific websites that are harmful to national interests?
Yeah, it turns turns out that I think the information about how to build a, well, I don't know, maybe you weren't, I was thinking of nuclear bomb, but so no, I don't consider that a paradox that the United States doesn't try to censor that information, because they're smart enough to know that that level of censorship is going to run into First Amendment problems. But I am distressed, and I do think that it's unjustifiable that we have the intelligence and law enforcement agents so eager to surveil the U.S. population, and this involves both wiretapping and and internet surveillance. So I think the censorship risks are actually less likely to come from the government trying to stop the free flow of information that's out there in the public anyway. Now the Assange, the WikiLeaks case is a really interesting case, and it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out, because if they get a legal precedent, if they get a conviction on Assange on some basis that he talked to somebody who talked to somebody who talked to somebody who talked to somebody who talked to Bradley Manning, who then sent the the information somewhere. It's really, it's always, I have a lot of respect for investigative journalists, but it's really going to be hard for them to know what they can do and what they can't do in terms of getting information from government officials.
Last question.
Yeah.
Is there even a horizon for the internet growth? I mean, like, is there going to be such exponential growth for the internet and its bandwidth and its usage that it's just going to collapse someday?
No. The bandwidth. The problem with the internet is not the bandwidth problem; it's the access problem. So not everybody has broadband access. I gather it's particularly true in Puerto Rico that there's actually not terrific broadband access to the internet, and that what passes as broadband is actually fairly low speeds, even for those who have it, by comparison with what's available in the States. So this is, I think, a national shame. And we have over and over again in this country had government programs to disseminate empowering technologies to impoverished and remote communities across the country. We did it with electric power. It was not economically profitable for the power companies to pull power lines to farms in the middle of Nebraska, but that was a national priority, so we turned on the power across the country. We did it with the telephone system. There was a whole regulatory structure in telephone pricing, which still exists actually, which is collecting revenues to subsidize the cost of pulling wires to places in remote parts of America where telephone service wouldn't be economically feasible for the telephone company. So there have been these public-private partnerships in power and in telephony and even in television, actually. But for some reason, even though this was an Obama priority in his campaign, the Congress has been unable to recognize that the general enlightenment of the public through the distribution of broadband is the problem. I'm less worried about it's amazing what the capacity of a single fiber optic cable really is. So I don't think it's going to collapse anytime soon. Anybody else? Yes. Here. Oh, got one. Is there another microphone over there? Yeah, go ahead.
I got a question. There's a dispute between the news television and the bloggers. Some people, and I read an article about this, they're saying that they want to join the news media with the blogging. It can happen, right?
Well, can is whether it economically can or not, I don't know. But the problem with the tension there is that the bloggers have no professional standards, right? They are not bound by any of the sort of codes of professional ethics that traditional journalists are, news journalists are.
Yeah, but
on the other hand, as the example I just gave you about the global voices, that was the sort of next to last slide there, showed that really can be a very good source of information in places where the journalism industry has been unable to post people.
Oh, and I got another question.
I don't think I really answered that question. I mean,
No,
because you're really asking a sort of, I mean, that's a question that's important and is open, very much open. Is this sort of citizen journalism through blogging? It's so far away from traditional professional news gathering. Is there some way to meld these?
But it can happen right in the next years that bloggers can be considered as a type of journalism.
Yes, they are a type of journalism. There's no doubt about that.
And there's some laws in one website like YouTube that censor movies or types of movies that are considered educational. Is it supposed to apply to what is the law? The free use, because
fair use.
The fair use, because you're using it for personal or educational purposes.
Yeah. Well, there's a truly educational exemption for copyright laws, but it applies to educational institutions, not to people who are sitting at home watching YouTube. So I don't think legally the educational use gets you off the hook. The trouble is that YouTube pretty much has to automatically take down everything that anybody claims is infringing somebody's copyright, because they're completely absolved of responsibility for hosting the video as long as they do that. And if they don't do that, they essentially have to go to court to join the party that wants the movie up there. And YouTube's a free service. They have the first hour of lawyer's time they hire will wipe out any profit that they could have made from hosting that kind of material. So it's not worth it to them. So I think it's the copyright law itself that's the problem there.
Yeah, there's some cases that I question how the copyright laws are handled.
Yeah, yes, copyright laws are a mess. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Andres Colon. You were mentioning that Julian Assange, and for that sense, WikiLeaks could get in real trouble should they release the Bank of America data. And
at least they'd have something to charge him with, which they don't yet.
That's right. But are you aware of the anonymous phenomenon?
Yeah.
And I read some news that they were about to release the Bank of America data, I think this Monday.
Right.
And so I would like to know your thoughts in regards to that kind of phenomenon on the internet, where you have groups of people that are gathering information, doing denial of service attacks, and sometimes for political purposes that we may agree with or we may not agree with, but also for also to do harm and bullying. And how do you think we should prepare, or governments, what we should do, taking into consideration that we would like the freedom of information exchange, but we would also like some form of protection?
Yeah, the denial of service attacks, I think technological solutions to that will evolve. I mean, it should still be illegal and all the rest of that, but I think they'll become pointless once the technology develops adequately so that they're ineffective. So on that one, I'm a little bit of a technological utopian. This whole all the internet technology is in a state of evolution. Right now, offense always has the advantage over defense in any game like this, and at the moment, the people with the power to do the denial of service attacks will have the upper hand. But so we need more secure laptops because a lot of the attacks are coming from privately owned computers, from people who don't even know that they're participating in these attacks and so on. So the sort of the computer infrastructure that lies behind the current unhappy state of this game is something that I think has some scientific solutions to it. Do I like what Anonymous does? No, of course not. So they're bad people. They should, something should happen to them. But that's that's neither here nor there. I don't think that's and I don't like what Assange did. This is my country. I don't like my diplomatic secrets being out there. I think, as I say, I'm perfect. Anybody who says he's a bad guy, but arrest, you don't arrest somebody unless you can find a law that they've broken. If you go to the principle that you can arrest people because they're bad guys, even though they haven't broken any laws, that's like not the way the world is supposed to work in a democratic society.
I would like to also thank you for your answer. I would like to also hear your thoughts in regards to the future of malware and also the proposed internet kill switch.
Okay. Well, let's see. How many more hours do we have? So malware. So I've got a slightly, I'm moving over on malware to the point of view that Microsoft has been around long enough that any civil liability for bad software will kill innovation defense, right? Their defense of their crappy operating system and the fact that every time they release it, it doesn't work, and the guys in Kazakhstan or wherever they are who are sitting there hacking it have the hacks ready even before it's released because they, okay? And their defense is always, oh, don't regulate us because, we're innovative. Well, they're not innovative anymore, all right? They're just not. They're like, we're beyond, right? If, it's true, if the regulations on the airbags and thickness of the bumpers and all the rest of this stuff that we have for automobiles in 2011 had been put in place in 1940, right? Nobody would be driving cars because nobody would be able to make them. So that's their argument is always that don't regulate us because we're going to be the economic future of the world, and if any regulation will stifle our innovation, we'll be afraid to put out products. And I'm kind of now fed up with that, and I think they've been getting away with it long enough, and they should start to have some civil liabilities for putting out software operating systems on which so much of the national economy and the world economy depends, that can be hacked by teenagers in Bulgaria. Okay, it's got real cost when these systems go down, and Microsoft ought to have some kind of liability for it. And then I bet their systems would be more secure, and we wouldn't have quite so much of a malware problem. So that's my answer to the malware question. The internet kill switch is a ridiculous idea. It's one of these, it won't work. It's anti-democratic. It's just one of these fantasies that people like Mike McConnell, who, by the way, works for a company that will get commissioned to build this kill switch for them, thinks are a wonderful idea. Okay, all this stuff about more. So you always follow the money on any of these people who come up with ideas about how the internet should be better controlled than it is. Somebody else? Okay.
No more
questions.
No more questions? Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. I feel a little embarrassed that I flunked all your tests. But having said that, well, misery likes company, so I guess we're all together in that one. But having said that, I really appreciate your sharing with us all this information. It has given us a lot of food for thought. Way too much information. I think we would be able to extend that. And I'll switch to Spanish now. Muchísimas gracias al Dr. Lewis por haber estado con nosotros. Además de hacernos pasar un poquito de pacho, de no saber todos los tests, todas las pruebas que nos puso, ha compartido con nosotros muchísima información. Como él dice, way too much information, quizás no. Pero ciertamente podemos continuar la discusión. La vamos a estar continuando precisamente mañana a partir de las 8:30 de la mañana. Vamos a estar transmitiéndolo en Ustream. Y se va a estar, también va a estar disponible a partir del lunes en YouTube. Pero recuerden entrar a la página de Sagrado, sería maestría25.sagrado.edu. Buenas noches y los invito a compartir unos piscolabis para seguir la conversación.